winning an Olivier doesn't mean you have money suddenly. You know, you're probably still a relatively poor artist at that point, you know, for most people.
As a director, you're creating a space, you're creating a culture, you're creating an expectation, you're interacting with people, and you're guiding people with and through in order to produce something for the audience.
In my 10,000 hours, really, managing rooms of people to try and get us all to move in the same direction. That is my favorite skill set that I've learned. And as a director, you have to take responsibility for that. You have to kind of go, it's my fault, I haven't found the way yet. I haven't found the way of putting it that is making this thing happen. The person in charge can ruin all of that by how they lead.
Donnacadh is an Olivier and Offie award-winning director, experienced designer, and story architect specializing in live theatre, immersive experiences, and experiential learning, creating narrative-led experiences for entertainment, education, and global brands.
I guess it began with this question of what is it that I can bring to other places? I'm going to get myself into places where people need that expertise, and I'm going to see what they need, and they're going to see whether I'm going to be useful to them. We wanted something that was really high impact. We wanted something they'd never seen before, and they hadn't ever seen anything like it before. Neither had I. Those of us working on it hadn't really.
What do you think is the potential for this kind of work as the world gets even faster? For corporations that perhaps struggle to make any meaningful shifts, where do you think the opportunities lie with using theatrical, immersion and experiential? Donnacadh, welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for making this happen today. Where are we right now? Where are we sitting?
We're in Finchley in North London.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you know Finchley well?
I know Finchley a little. I live quite near. I live near here in Crouch End, which you know very well.
I know very well.
Just at the foot of Alexandra Palace.
Yes.
The People's Palace. And we come here a little bit. There's a nice there's Arts Depot, nice little theatre around here.
There is. And also Crouch End, North London is famed for creatives and actors, actresses, and theatre.
Yeah.
I know you went on a roller coaster ride in the theatre world, and obviously honed your skills, developed your skills, produced some amazing shows that are obviously award-winning shows. How would you encapsulate that period of your career? What are some of the kind of the key kind of highlights of that period for you?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's about a 20-year period, really.
Yeah.
So it's a big old period of time. I mean, it's certainly roller coaster is a good way of putting it, for sure. It's a great way of putting it. You know, bumpy. Came to London. You know, there was periods where I didn't have any work. There's periods where I was signing on. You know, I was kind of just trying to get the council to pay my rent just to kind of get by, and trying to get free work, just trying to get anything, trying to get a foothold in a new city. So I was trained as an actor in Dublin and started directing in Dublin and then moved here.
Yeah.
So just trying to get a foothold, trying to figure out what the scene was, and trying to survive financially. So there was a lot of that in the early days in the first, but I was quite lucky as well. I was quite young when I got my first job at the Royal Shakespeare Company as an assistant director. So that was a kind of an aim of mine. So I was about 23-ish when I started working there, and ended up doing 10 shows there across 3 years. So that was a pretty pivotal, that was probably after actor training, kind of starting to direct. That was probably the next kind of big thing that happened as I landed up in Stratford.
Yeah. And then what was kind of, what did that give you, that kind of springboard then to kind of do once you kind of get, because ultimately that struggle to get that first win, that first kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
What followed after that?
Well, again, it's interesting, you know, I think it's a peculiar career, you know, and I think I've realized how peculiar it is more so having kind of sidestepped a little bit, you know, in my own, what I do myself, and met a broader range of people with different careers. But what was interesting about working at the RIC was it was 3 years of regular money and big productions, and got to work on some really iconic productions when I was there, with Michael Boyd, who was the artistic director at the time. I was his assistant director for 2.5 years. We did 8 shows together, and it was amazing. But also I left there at 26 years old, having just spent 3 years working on the biggest shows in the country. And I wanted to direct. I wanted to get out there and I wanted to direct some big shows. But I was 26. I was 26. And also, and you know, I'd been assisting for 3 years, so I hadn't been putting work out there. And it was a bit of a there was a bit of a crash course in that you've got to get out there and prove yourself. You've got to get out there and make your name. That body of work was significant, but nothing is handed to you in the theatre industry. Like, nothing. I wish it were, but nothing is ever handed. So I had to go and make work. So for the next 5 or 6 years, I made my own productions. I set up a production company. I found plays that I wanted to do. I went and I got funding. I got philanthropy. I got backers. People like Lady Sainsbury of Turville, who I met in Stratford, was a real a great backer across a couple of projects. Fatboy Slim came in on one thing, provided all the sound kit when I created a new venue called Peep in Edinburgh. And just hustled, found money, found resources, found collaborators, and it was a great period for creativity because it was all new work. It was all new plays or new work that I was commissioning or that I'd found. So very creative, but yeah.
And so, I mean, that 16-year-old you described, definitely shining through, but on a whole different level, without a doubt. How, just for those that haven't worked in theatre, what's the chaos?
I think there's a few different kinds of chaos. The chaos when you're making it is the chaos you love.
In what way?
I guess people who work in the events industry would probably connect with that as well, or any kind of live events industry. The actual making and the kind of getting something up on its feet and then getting it to that opening night is a kind of frenetic madness, but it's so full of fuel as well. You're fueled by the possibility. I think what's interesting about the theatre industry is that any show, and I had the privilege of a couple of shows this being the case with, but any show can be the next big thing. Any show. So in a sense, across the, whatever, I don't know, 80, 90 productions I worked on across my career, there's maybe the director on 60 of them. Every single time you're in there and you're making it and you're thinking, if I get this right, this is the one. This could be the one. And, most of the time you're wrong, just like any kind of, in a sense, every single show you do is a startup, and 95% of startups fail, right? So or not fail, but just not become the big thing.
Yeah.
And so when it does happen that something really kind of something really takes off, it is magical, and you get this kind of bubble of success that comes along every now and again and kind of sweeps you up and takes you somewhere else. But the madness of being in and doing it is a beautiful place.
So describe to us, because of this of the moments of the success when it did go off and when it did accelerate. Describe that.
Well, I guess there's a few different times and on different scales, because obviously you get different, like when you're at a certain age or a certain time, I won Best Director at the Irish Student Drama Awards when I was 20, and that was like the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, and it was, and I still, when somebody asks like what was the kind of the peak of your career, like emotionally the biggest moment, it might have been that one, because I'd come from nowhere at that point, and I knew nothing, and I'd kind of found my way to that. But so there are different kind of peaks, which are less headline friendly, but. I did a show called Rotterdam in I think we started in 2012, maybe 2013, 2014, 2015. 2014, I found the play.
Yeah.
I found the script in a pile of scripts at the Theatre 503, which is a new writing theatre in Battersea. I found the script and I loved it. And it made me cry the first time I read it. And then the first time I read it out loud, which was shortly later, it made me cry again, and it made me laugh out loud. It made me cry and laugh out loud. And I've rarely had such a strong, immediate impact to a script. And I decided that I was going to do that show. And there was an actor I was working with at the time. We'd been looking for something to do together called Alice McCarthy. And this was, she had the same experience of going, wow, this is the one. And So I got in touch with John Britton, who wrote it, and we talked about it, and he was really keen for me to do it. He knew my work as well. At that point, he'd seen productions I directed, and we didn't know each other, but we kind of happened across each other in a few different contexts. Anyway, that play, we put that play on, we found the money, we put it together. My friends Louis and Brian, who run a company called Hartshorn Hook, who run the Arts Theatre, they came in as producers. It opened, and it was very successful when it first opened in a small theatre, 60 or 70 seat theatre in Battersea. It was a kind of an instant hit, really, in a very small scale. From there, we got picked up to go into the Trafalgar Studios in the West End, which they had a small 100-seat theatre. So went in there. We also got booked to go off Broadway from that initial run. And then that run in the West End at the Trafalgar Studios allowed us to be nominated for Olivier Awards, which we in no way expected.
Wow.
But we got nominated for Outstanding Achievement in an Affiliate Theatre, which is the award basically which covers pretty much anything that happens in the theatres which are under 300 seats. Can
Amazing.
be
and there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. Yeah, there's a lot more. And there's a lot more stuff that's eligible for that award than, let's say, best comedy, which is maybe 7 shows in any given year, 5-6 shows. So it's a nice one to be nominated for, and it's the Plucky Upstart Award, but we got nominated for that, and we won it. So we all showed up in our glad rags to the Royal Albert Hall. And when they read out the nominations, and they read out Rotterdam, and we all lost our expletive.
Amazing. How's that feel? Looking back on that moment, how would you describe that now? Looking back on reflection and having gone through a bit of a journey and a transition yourself, which we'll cover. But I just curious to see how has there been a shift to that, how you view that moment, or
the winning moment.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm very grateful for it. I feel very lucky to have been able to get into that position, and very lucky to have won the award. There will have been loads of other great projects and great shows. I think one of the reasons we won was it was 2016, I guess. We were in the West End, and it was so we went into the West End after we won the Olivier. We had a run in the West End, but before that, in the Trafalgar Studios, we were the first show in the West End with a trans protagonist, and so there was politics and social politics, and there was a new story we were bringing. I mean, again, not new. Nothing is new in that sense, but it was quite early in the conversation around that trans visibility and that kind of that aspect of the kind of the language, the dialogue within the queer community, and awareness around that. So and it was a rom-com, is the other thing to say. It was a rom-com. It wasn't tragedy. It wasn't awful. Nobody got killed in the end. It was a really funny, really touching, poignant play, and people laughed, people cried.
Yes.
And it was very accessible. And I think that was part of its success. But so I feel lucky that I happened across that. I feel lucky that we hit the zeitgeist as well.
How did your skill evolve and your mastery of theatre directorship and process for yourself? But I'm just curious, like, what if you kind of had to put them into certain buckets or overriding kind of skill sets or areas? How would you categorize those?
Yeah, good question. How would I categorize this? I think. Okay, so I used to run a class called Preparation and Instinct, which we might touch on again later, and so the idea of that class was that, and this is an acting class originally, but it totally applies to what I do at work as well, and what a lot of other people might do. That in order to be able to work on instinct, which is that's the beautiful thing, right? What do you call it, flow state or whatever. In order to be able to work on instinct, which it's a wonderful thing to be in, because you have complete trust in yourself. You're playing, you're working, you're adapting. It's an incredibly agile state to be in. It's very adaptive. It's very very thinking and feeling, and you can make huge strides when you can find yourself in that kind of creative flow. If there's other people involved at the same time, real magic can happen, and which is kind of what the rehearsal room is like.
Yeah.
But in order to be able to do that, there is preparation that makes that possible. It's not a magic trick. It's not an aptitude that you just have. I mean, yes, there is an aptitude, and there's a certain aptitude and practice in allowing yourself to go into that space where you are just doing, where you're just in action. You're not self-conscious. You're just doing. That is a kind of a skill, but that's a skill that comes through practice. You can't just pick it up. That's a practiced skill. But that's not worth very much if the prep is not there. And obviously one part of the prep is your experience. So, the thousands and thousands and thousands of little moments you've navigated and noticed and got through in your work that happen. They help you in that moment. Your process they're all in there, you're processing. But the other part of the preparation is the preparation for the specific project. And that's the preparation of relationships. The people you prep, in order to be in a state of real collaboration with somebody, like, that's precious, and it's not for free. It doesn't happen easily. No. Again, some people more than others. It might happen. It might come quickly with some people and not quickly with others. But either way, it takes work and it takes maintenance, and it takes care and consideration. So there's preparation of relationships. There's preparation of the material, and your relationship to the material, building a relationship for yourself with the material. Yeah.
You talked about space there, but I just want to anchor in holding space for either from a preparation perspective, but also creating, I guess, spaces also as a director. You're creating a space, you're creating a culture, you're creating an expectation, you're interacting with people, and you're guiding people with and through in order to produce something for the audience. So that's space, because I think that's how I perceive you sharing this, such an important element. How did you create that?
Yeah, it's hugely important. And the theatre is a great training for that, because the only way it gets made is by a lot of people in a room working together for the same goal.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to do. And when it's not working, it's not fun at all, right? A lot of people in a room, and it's not working, is tough. So as a director, you are the kind of de facto, chairman of the room, in a sense, chairperson of the room. And Michael Boyd, who I worked with in Stratford for a long time, he said that his style of directing was kind of a benevolent dictatorship, which I think is an interesting way of putting it. That it is a dictatorship in the sense that there is a figurehead, but the benevolence is also key. It's not a figurehead that looks to get in the way or assert itself all the time. It's an agile, sometimes quiet, sometimes very present, sometimes but always very watchful, very attentive presence.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
But also, it's important that people know who's in charge. In that sense, in that context, and I think that's the case in a lot of organizations. But there is a relaxation that happens when it's clear that there is somebody in charge.
Yes.
How the person in charge can ruin all of that by how they lead, or they can harness all of that by how they lead. And so, I have been, for in my 10,000 hours, really managing rooms of people to try and get us all to move in the same direction. And that is my favorite skill set that I've learned. And I don't think you can't just come across that. It takes time.
Yeah.
And I love doing it. One of the reasons I love doing it, I think, is because it is so knife edge, and we as people, we're much more accustomed to being in rooms where it's not, especially in a work context, we're much more accustomed to being in rooms where it's not totally comfortable and you're not at ease and it's not actually that safe. And over those years, I've built up a skill set for finding ways to make those spaces safe and creative and engaging and with a real sense of purpose. And I love bringing that to groups, because it's not something that everyone's able to do, I suppose. I enjoy doing that, and I feel like it's useful.
Yes. What must it be like having directed and prepared, and then of course as a director you're moving into a pure observer role during a show? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So What's that feeling like? Because then you're relinquishing,
Yeah.
I would say the word control, but you're relinquishing trust onto the cast to deliver
Yeah.
this amazing show that's been curated and
Yeah.
put together. What's
Totally.
that feeling like?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's varied over time. I mean, when I started directing, I would be sitting in the audience mouthing all the lines along, kind of kicking every ball, is the
Nice.
in the football management metaphor, heading every corner. I came from acting, so that was kind of natural. I was kind of in every. It's also how I directed initially. I felt my way into every moment. I mean, sometimes I would be there, in the rehearsal space or on the set before the actors were there, and I'd be walking through stuff. I'd be testing out movements or shapes or certain bits of staging just to feel them myself, just to feel them in my own body, to get a sense of them. But so I guess there's that part of it. But yeah, letting go is tough. I mean, you're powerless. I mean, directing, there's an awful lot of watching in directing. So the idea of sitting there watching and being silent and just being attentive, that in itself is absolutely normal. Again, that's a key part of the skill set. The ability to to have the stamina to watch and listen with a very high level of attention and recall for up to two or 3 hours, with a notebook, but up to 2 or 3 hours. That's a key part of the skill set. And I remember when I started directing, I didn't have the stamina for that. This thing would happen where I would note the first half of the show, and then in the second half of the show there'd be like 7 notes. First half of the show I'd have like an hour of notes. Second half I'd have half a page.
Interesting.
And it took me years to build up the stamina to be able to be fully attentive for the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the letting go is tough. I mean, I remember actually, funnily enough, sitting in the theatre in the West End, watching Rotterdam. It's terrible, really, so embarrassing. It's such an embarrassing story. But I was watching Rotterdam in the West End, and this was probably, we're probably 100 shows into the run. So I'd seen the show, I mean, I hadn't seen all the performances, of course, but I'd seen it a lot of times. This was the fourth venue the show had lived in, the Arts Theatre, in kind of near Leicester Square, and there was a moment where one of the actresses. There's a key moment in the show, big emotional climax, where the protagonist kind of something massive happens to them, and they come through a door at the back of the stage, and we see them for the first time in this particular way, and it should just knock you out emotionally. It's just a knockout moment. We had this brilliant soundtrack going on at the same time, and there was this kind of movement sequence that happened building up to this climax. And one of the actresses who'd been in the show from the beginning, sometimes she would not be far enough across the stage so that when the protagonist came through the door, we all saw them. Sometimes she wouldn't quite get past the door. So when and then she'd be standing in front of the person at the big climactic moment. And this used to drive me up the wall. And some people, you give them a good instruction, like, that makes sense, that where they're like, yeah, that makes sense, I get that, and then they do it, and then you probably never have to come back to it again. And some people, you have to say the same thing multiple times in different ways, and in the hope that the next way you find to say it is going to be the one that fixes it. And as a director, you have to take responsibility for that. You have to kind of go, it's my fault. I haven't found the way yet. I haven't found the way of putting it that is making this thing happen. But anyway, in that moment in the show, I think I was sitting up in the circle, and I think I shouted something. Nobody could hear me because, the music was so loud that nobody would have heard me. I think I shouted, "Get out of the something way." And I've never done it before or since, and I only did it, I think, because I knew the sound system was really high at that point, and I was sitting next to the designer, but there was no other audience members too close to us. So that tells you a little bit about sometimes how it feels when you have to hand everything over. But it's not a proud moment. I mean, your job as the leader in that production. Your job is that when you walk away and you sit down in the auditorium, your job is that everybody in your team is absolutely ready and prepared, and it's your job to make sure they are.
Yeah.
You know, it's that's your responsibility. If you're genuinely not sure how it's going to go on that opening night, then you haven't done your job well enough.
Yeah.
You should know. And of course there are variables. It's live theatre, it's live events, things are going to change, but that's part of it. You've also got to make sure you've prepped your team with enough agility to roll with whatever random thing happens to happen on the night, you know, because stuff goes wrong.
So if I walked into your life around about the time when your theatre career was coming to an end, what would I see? What kind of behaviours, emotion, moment would I be entering into Donnacadh's life at that point?
Well, it was a great period in many ways. So about 3 years, we're talking about 3 years ago. So I'm about 40, basically. I'm approaching 40, knocking around 40, which I guess is maybe that's part of it, right? The kind of certain thing of going, I've hit another decade marker. Yeah.
It's a midlife. Yeah.
But I had this moment which a lot of parents will connect with. It's astonishing that it took me till 40 in a way, but I decided that I needed to work less. I had to work less, and I needed to earn more. And another thing happened around. There'd been a growing thought over the previous 5 years or so, probably between Olivier and the West End, all that stuff, and and that point, which was a sense of having done it. And it wasn't a self-congratulatory sense of I did it. It was a kind of a having a word with myself sense of going, what were the things you wanted to achieve when you were a kid? You're 17, 18 years old. You're thinking, I'm going to go into the theatre. I'm going to be a theatre director. I'm going to move to London. I'm going to try and get work at the Royal Shakespeare Company. What did you want to achieve? What's the climax? What are you achieving? And of course, it's a complicated bunch of things. I mean, certainly getting to the point where I was good was pretty big on the list.
Yeah.
Getting to the point where people recognized that ability was high on the list. Little ego thing, I guess. But basically, the word I had with myself in a way, and as a kind word I had with myself, was to kind of go, look, you've won an Olivier, you've had your work in the West End. You worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company. You've directed for the Royal Shakespeare Company. You've made nearly 100 productions. Maybe you've done it. Maybe you did it. Maybe you did it. The thing, You spent 20 years getting really good at this thing. Maybe you did it. Maybe you don't have to. How many productions do you need to direct? Another 100? You'd get us 200. Another 50. Another 30. How many more productions?
It's healthy.
And I think I just kind of thought, well, actually, do you know what? I don't know if I need to direct that many more productions at all. And I still, and that was a big moment. And that, led to this question of, okay, well then what am I going to do? What do I want to do?
Yeah. So I love that. This is super interesting, because I think it's for anybody looking to transition and to utilize their skill sets, but in new ways. But that's quite a big jump for many, or there's a journey that you have to go on. So I love that kind of curiosity lens. Where did you start to kind of find a footing and a direction? Where did things start to then you start to find a bit more of a footing in? Oh, hang on a minute, there's something here. To take the second step or the third step.
I think I found several.
Cool.
Yeah, I found several. I think that was, and that's partly, I guess that suits me.
Yeah.
I'm a natural portfolio career type of person. I like a range of things, and I've always been freelance, and I've always worked on multiple projects at the same time. So I'm very used to juggling, and I like deadlines. So it suits me quite well. So it was quite natural for me. So I guess, I found basically wherever I found yield, I kept moving. And most of the time when I kept moving, in the places where I kept finding more yield, more interest, more connections, more logic to me being in those spaces. And then people, because then you start to find people, and actually people are that's what it really comes down to. You find a person who you connect with, and you start to build a relationship. You trust each other, and you want to try something, right? So I started finding those things, and I found those things in again, I've trained actors, directors, and writers my whole career, and I'm interested in education. So I found that in learning and development, in corporate learning and development. I found this space. Because I've done so much facilitation of spaces and groups, that was very easy for me to think about group dynamics and making work for groups, creating whatever workshops, whatever words you want to use, sessions, experiences. That was very natural for me to design those and run those. But actually, I met people who recognized that I was bringing a lens and coming from a perspective which was really unusual and could be very useful for the right client. And I found yield in the attractions industry. Get totally different.
Yes.
And I was the creative director initially, and now consultant creative director and narrative designer on an immersive indoor Peppa Pig themed kind of play world for kids, which I was writing when my kids are very small, which is going to open in the spring in the UK. So completely different, right? Completely different.
Yeah.
But actually not so much. A lot of shared skill set, a lot of shared processes. Next year, I'm hopefully working on a horror attraction. So not always just kid stuff. And then also I didn't abandon everything as well, right? So I also, something I've loved doing as well. As I was saying to this to you the other day, because I'm working on one right now, is doing narrative diagnostics. So, which I have done for startups around brand and brand identity. Most of the time I'm doing it on a script or a creative project. So right now I'm working on a musical for a client who I worked on another musical for a year ago. And I basically do a kind of a deep dive into the work. I do a kind of a McKinsey on it, and I interview people and I figure out, what are we trying to make here? What is it? What's at the heart of it? Where's the fire? Where's the passion? What have we got to say? And then how's it being said at the moment? How is it being? Where is the success in how this is being said? Where are the story beats that are really working? Where is it falling down? Where are we losing interest? Where is the, where is the success and the failures in the current draft? I love doing that. And when a company, as with this one, when they are willing to kind of invest enough, and it's not a load of time, but invest enough for me to give a week, let's say, a solid 7 days over a month or two, to do that, I can be incredibly thorough and kind of bring kind of my whole experience to it. And so I've been also doing that, that which brought me out to LA last year, and there's been some fun stuff in that. And again, so there's yield there, these different places. But that's normal for me because I've always been freelance. So I've always had to kind of go, that's a job, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that job. Yeah, go on then. I've always had to do it. So that's not new. I'm able to be choosier than I used to be, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I genuinely like all of the different things I'm doing. And because joy is key, of course. Joy is incredibly important. You have to find a way of enjoying it. That's not to say you're going to enjoy everything. There's moments in projects which are difficult and things are hard, but you can't always be driven by joy. I think at the moment I am finding, and I don't know if maybe it's to do with how I approached this kind of new career phase. Maybe curiosity includes joy implicitly. I don't know, because if I was led by curiosity, the thing with curiosity, you are going to lean further into something that just tickles you or connects with you or gives you a bit of a fizz, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be less curious when something leaves you cold.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something about that kind of curiosity approach which has led to these different directions, and there's other ones as well, which I would go on.
Tell us a little bit more about the corporate project and what that was about and the context and the work there.
So it was for I got approached by a company called Thompson Harrison, a learning and development company, who I've gone on to work with more since, and I have more work going on with them. I love working with them. It's run by two women, Sam and Tracy, very experienced, super smart, great to work with. Hi, Sam and Tracy. And they approached me. They didn't know me. I was recommended by someone they'd worked with. They had this idea with a big insurance company client of theirs. They had this idea. They were trying to figure out what their big leadership program would be for that year. They'd done 3 or 4 in the past for this company once a year, big project. They often involve the whole company, which is 500 staff. They've got, again, big contractors as well, but the core company's relatively lean. And they weren't kind of, everything was getting rejected. Everything was a no, I don't think that's right, or we've done that before. And for some reason, somebody in these meetings, before I got involved, had the mad idea that maybe they could do an immersive project. And for some reason, the kind of senior team there kind of went, oh, that's interesting. What would that be? And of course, Sam and Tracy, to some extent, were like, I don't know. Well, let's find out.
Explore, yeah.
Yeah. So they, so luckily for me, and perhaps for them, they ended up with me on the phone. This is a very unusual image, but it was a nice moment. I was in the garden of, I was in Gary's garden in the valley in LA watching tiny hummingbirds flying around his flowers as I first spoke to Tracy about this project. It was a nice moment, a nice moment of things kind of aligning, I don't often get to spend time in gardens in LA with hummingbirds, but I did that. That was my week. And they wanted to make they wanted to kind of decide this idea of something immersive, and it was very vague at that point. So I started working on it, and the first thing I wanted to do was get as much information as I could, kind of on the client and what they wanted. And people, agencies, companies can often be very protective about the relationship with the client. But I'm glad to say in this case, I was allowed to meet the client pretty early on. And that was really vital because there was so little I could do in a way until I got a feel for who they were and what they needed. I came up with this idea that we would put them inside a show. So, we would put them inside a show and they would be participants, and we would do 30 of the participants at a time. We'd have a cast of, I pushed for quite a big number of casts, so we ended up, I think, with 8 or 10, I think, can't quite remember which, maybe 8, but we quite a big cast, so quite a big, the ratio of 8 or 10 actors to 30 people is a great ratio for making this kind of work. And then we ran through a couple of different concepts, and what we settled on was that we were going to put them into a docking company in the late 1930s. So it was Hoxton. We rented Hoxton Docks, this amazing building in Hoxton for a month. We had it. Yeah. We made the show in there quite quickly. I've obviously been writing it for the previous 2 or 3 months, but the kind of the end, the kind of final getting it made thing happened quite fast. By about 6 days rehearsals, which is very short in my experience. I mean, other people would be like, well, you had 6 days? Obviously in the events industry, that's a huge amount of time. Yeah. For me, it was pretty short, but I've got better at working on short time scales in the last few years. So it was a working dock company, 1938, with all these characters who worked there. And our role as participants was to get in there, and we were casual workers for the day. So that was the kind of concept. And then obviously it was a learning project. It was a leadership project. So fundamentally what the piece was about was complex interpersonal moments, difficult conversations, and the challenge was about organizational health in a sense. So the challenge of the participants was to notice issues of organizational health within the company you were a casual worker in. Interesting. And then we created situations where they had to step in, and we created this kind of freeze thing, like the kids play, right, where they just kind of clap their hands and they stop life. So we had this kind of freeze thing where the action was stopped, and we had these 3 characters. We called them the Morgan Freemans, but anyway, I won't go into the detail of that. But anyway, it relates to the Shawshank Redemption and Our Town, a play written in 1910 or something. they had a guide character with them the whole time, who was kind of their person who was with them. But that character was kind of from the world of the thing, but also kind of knew who they were. So kind of a middle place person. And that person could stop time. And so we would see these problems unfold, and then we would stop time, and then they started to be able to talk to the characters about what was going on and really try and get to the bottom of what the problem was. And then we created these situations where they would strategize in small groups about what the person could do. And then they would have to kind of advise the person on how they might approach the problem. And then we created these situations. Again, and this is all quite fast moving.
Yeah.
Basically, for example, the person's having a problem with the boss because there's a communication problem. They're really keen to progress in a certain way, and the boss just isn't hearing it. So we go away. We think about it. We come out. We give the person advice about how they could approach it, and then like after 2 minutes of giving that person advice, the boss happens to walk past, and then it's like go. So we created these kind of quite reflective moments.
Yes.
And then shit just happened.
So you kind of had this kind of situation they observed, and it's then a freezing time for them to reflect, to discuss, and then you move them quickly into an action of doing.
Yeah,
pretty quick.
The results.
Amazing.
Yeah, the results. They gave advice. They gave strategic advice, and then the quality of the advice, the quality of the communication, because great advice is one thing. If the person isn't able to hear it because you don't know how to say it to them, or you've been ignoring all kinds of triggers about how they're feeling right now, then it's not going to help them very much. So there was a real direct cause and effect about their strategy. There was no kind of, it wasn't, it's very easy to be theoretical about solving problems.
100%.
So that was what we tried to do.
So 1920s, is that right?
1938.
38, you set it out.
Yeah, kind of.
And how did you immerse people into that time and space?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the venue was over 100 years old. So it's in its original form. So it was the whole venue was this period specific warehouse, big brick and metal and huge shutters with these big revolving things. So we spent a chunk of budget on getting a brilliant space, which absolutely worked.
Yeah.
And then there was sound design, there was lighting design, and then obviously all the actors were costumed and in role, and of course. There was a script which I had to really kind of work on to kind of get that kind of language, just the linguistic form of London in the late 30s, which is a great language to work in actually. Yeah. But I mean, I needed to. There was quite a lot of homework, quite a lot of like, how would they say that, which I had to do to figure out, and it took time.
How did the so if 30 were going through at any given time?
Yeah.
How long did it take to get the whole company through?
So the show was an hour and a half,
yeah.
And then after the show there was a 1 hour debrief. So it was 30 per half day. So I think we did 18 performances. So what was over 2.5 weeks.
So what was going on in the business while people were going through? Because obviously not. Some people are going to be in the second week having half the company gone through.
A lot of chat. A lot.
It must have created a real buzz in that. I mean,
there really was. Yeah.
You must have been a really interesting moment. Yeah.
I mean, even after the first day. Because the CEO came on the first day, which was nice. Thanks for showing up on the very first performance. Nothing to worry about. So the CEO came on the first day. Obviously, the kind of chief HR officer came on the first. I mean, she'd been involved through the whole thing, so that wasn't. She's lovely and was really supportive and wasn't scary. But there was a lot of important people on day one. And as soon as we did the first performance, like the Slack channel was all over the Slack channel back at work. So. Pretty much from day two onwards, people were coming with an even more level of like, what is this? We've heard, but also we asked people not to say too much.
Yeah, that's good.
We asked them not to say too much, so there was a real buzz around it. But also there was like what is it? What's going to happen?
I can't tell you.
What's going to happen? They told me it was really cool, but they also told me they weren't allowed to say. So there was this kind of mystery as well.
Amazing.
And it's gone on to it's had big impact. It's had real impact, and a few months ago we did a follow-up project, an offshoot project. Instead of the full 500, we worked with about 120 just in a week, and I took some of the characters. Well, I mean, this was their suggestion, but I took some of the characters from that project, brought them into this world, the kind of world of now, and then we did this whole kind of 3-hour session specifically around feedback, around how good feedback works, what the context is for good feedback. But again, is about communication, is about difficult conversations. So very much taking one of the key themes from that bigger project and making it into a more detailed session, which was just for the 100 most senior people at the company, really digging down into one aspect. So it was a real compliment, obviously, for them to come back and say, A, we want to follow up, and B, we want to follow up, which literally takes something from that show and develops it.
Yeah.
That was it was nice for us.
That's good
To get to go back into that world, but also to feel like.
And I think this is such a great example of bringing together, and really, again, just we've gone on this journey with you today of your career and the skills and how you've been evolving, but I think also like the power of immersion, the power of experiential design and intentionality in now a context where organizations are required, or there's a need to transform and change and accelerate that in a quick way and bring people with them in a meaningful way with I think quite old school learning and development techniques. They're trying to still do it with micro content or L&D different journeys and etc., or training formats. So I think to create profound shift requires profound experiences. I think particularly when you're bringing people through these experiences together, galvanizes, doesn't it? It creates an interaction between the groups. What do you think is the potential for this kind of work as the world gets even faster, dare I say, and also for corporations that perhaps are struggling or have struggled to make any meaningful shifts in their organisation? Where do you think the opportunities lie with using theatrical immersion and experiential?
Well, I think of the theatrical side of it. I think of that as a tool.
Yeah.
Maybe because I've worked in it for a long time, it's easier for me to see it like that. So I think in that particular instance, we used a theatrical environment and the idea of immersion because we wanted something that was really high impact. We wanted something they'd never seen before, and they hadn't ever seen anything like it before. Neither had I. Those of us working on it hadn't really.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that particular company is that they didn't invest in this because it's not going well. They invested in this because it's going well.
Oh, that's amazing.
They're doing great.
I love
it. They've just hit some really good targets in the last 2 years. They've just had they've just had a couple of whole things. They're doing really well as a company, and their investment in this is not about fixing problems. It's about harnessing where they're at and keep building, keep momentum, keep those bonds strong. Not get complacent. It's about lack of complacency. Actually, it's about not getting complacent. Just because we had a great 5 years, that doesn't mean we're going to have a great next 5 years. How do we keep communication, keep connection strong, particularly in a time where people are fundamentally, it is harder for people to stay connected. I think a lot of what's happening at the moment in the corporate sector, from the US to here, is everyone back in the office 4 days a week. There's a big movement on that right now.
There is.
And that's, whatever I don't work in that context, so I don't get to have an opinion on that. That's not for me to say. But what I do know for a fact is that that's gonna ruffle a lot of feathers. That's gonna be hard for a lot of people. That's the stick end of getting your team working and firing. I think what I've been doing in this kind of context, what people like Thompson Harris have been doing is gathering people together in a way which doesn't feel forced or one-sided. They come back to the office for 4 days. It's a slightly one-sided edict. The people who don't want to do that because they've got caring responsibilities being one of the biggest parts of it, or geography or whatever, like those people, it's going to be a real challenge for those people to bring people together in shorter bursts for a day or for a couple of days to really kind of connect. That can do a lot more. That can do a lot more for the company, for connections, for communications, than forcing everyone to come back into the city of London for 4 days a week. But anyway, again,
agree.
There are other positives to people being in the same building. Of course,
Yes.
there are positives. There are people that really suits as well. But but it's there is a lack of there's an intentionality about that in terms of business. There's not the intentionality in terms of the kind of human experience of work is not so strong. There are other ways of building those connections. They just need, and I think that's where experience design can make a real difference. Yeah, and then obviously for those companies, and there are many of those companies who aren't bringing everyone back to the office, or who that's just not their business model. Then the kind of the art and the skill and the value of gathering is huge.
Yes.
We were chatting before we started recording, and that you can, if there's someone in the company who's just brilliant at bringing people together, connecting people, getting people to communicate, to talk, to open up, then fantastic. Like, let that person do that. Like, what an asset to have a person like that. If you don't have a person like that in the company, but you recognize how important it is, then again, you've got a couple of options. You can outsource that. And if you can find the right company and the right relationship to a person or a group or whatever, then hugely useful.
So Donnacadh, I just want to ask you just a closing question, if I may. After everything kind of we've shared and gone through today, is there anything like you're still wrestling with? Just in terms of any curiosity or areas that you're still being curious about right now?
Wow, there's loads of things really. God, yeah. The further I go in this kind of career transition, the more things there are on the list of things that I find fascinating that I want to know more about.
Interesting.
Again, this thing about gathering is a word I've not used a lot until more recently. I think the skill of how you gather people is huge. Important. So yeah, for me, I think that's something I'm interested in seeing what more there is for me in that direction. Again, that was kind of new for me. Because I have so much experience of facilitation and of really leading people, that I'm really interested to know, what if you take that away? How can you create this environment where there is intentionality, people are being led to some extent, but actually the feeling, that's not how it feels. It feels like it feels like there's a lot of autonomy and a lot of space. Yeah. And I think that's a bigger design challenge than just leading it.
Agree.
And so that's a challenge I quite want to take up. Amazing.
Well, Donnacadh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to walk through your life pretty much today. And I hope it just, the intention really for us today was definitely obviously to share out that moments of transition. I think there's a lot of people out there who are going through lots of transitions right now. And I think there was a lot of really good, advice and insight into, especially be curious and to keep unraveling and keep exploring, particularly if you're in that kind of phase right now, you're in that transitional phase. I think it's some really good advice that you shared today, and of course the wonderful power of Experiential and this work that this important work that this brings. So look, thank you so much, a true experience designer, and thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.